Hey Vaishnava Guru, Yara Saguru, Yadase Guru,
Oh hey Vaishnava Thakura, Doyara Sagara, Edase Karuna Kori. Chaya vega domi, chaya dosha shodhi, chaya guna deho dase.
Chaya Vega Domi, Chaya Dosha Sodhi, Chaya Guna Deho Dase. Chaya Guna Deho Dase. Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare, Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare, Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare, Boshechi Sangero Ashe. Harinam Sankirtane. Tumi kripa kore Shadavindu diya, Tumi kripa kore Shadavindu diya, Tumi kripa kore Shadavindu diya, Deho Krishna Namadane. Krishna se tomara, Krishna dite para, tomara sakati ache.
Krishna se tomara, Krishna dite para, tomara shakati ache.
Vaishnava Thakura Doyara Sagara Vedase Karuna Kori Vaishnava Thakura Vaishnava Thakura Vaishnava Sagara Vedase Sagara Vaishnava Thakura Doyara Sagara Vaishnava Thakura Doyara Sagara Vedase Karuna Kori Vedase Karuna Kori Vedase Karuna Kori
Vedase Karuna Kori.
Hare Krishna Gopalji, how are you doing?
Hare Krishna. Please accept my obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Yes, I'm doing a little better today. I
Very
was a
good.
little under the weather yesterday, yes.
Hungry, I was thinking, yes, Maya always comes in small and like in a needle-shaped Maya. It always starts with one little thing, one unoffered cookie, and they eat it. No big deal. One devotee that we disregard or offend inadvertently,
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I think you need to be muted.
and then we're basically, cooked.
Oh, Krishna. Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Hare Krishna, Dhanavad Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna. Yes. Thank you for everyone for coming. Welcome, everyone. I apologize for missing last week. I was in New Vrindavan, and
Hare Krishna Prabhu, we got chance to hear your lecture in New Vrindavan. It was awesome.
well,
And to have darshan of senior devotees like Malti Mataji and all, they were there. It
yes.
was so good. Thank you. And there's some devotee shared the link. And I'm really thankful to that devotee who shared the link at the last minute and then got that opportunity.
Well, I think that it was only their kindness that I was asked to speak, because they are so senior and so wonderful. They actually spoke on the days before, and and I am feeling really surcharged by that trip to New Vrindavan. It was so much mercy there, so wonderful there, and all of you probably feel the same when you go to New Vrindavan. It's a very wonderful place. It's a wonderful spiritual atmosphere. There's wonderful devotees there. So yes, and I hope all of you are almost caught up on the homework. Let's see here. I'm just opening the slides. So, as you probably already noticed, I'm a little bit under the weather, and so please forgive my sore throat. Okay. Hare Krishna, Brandon and Brandy. Nice to see you on the call.
Hare Krishna, so nice to be back.
Yes, it's nice to be together again. Yes. Okay, so here we are, introduction. Om Gyanam Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhuvya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So last time we completed up to chapter 7, and this time we'll start from chapter 8, which is a very special chapter, very relevant for all of us, because we all live in the world of death, right? That's something we all have in common. We all live in a world where they say it's as sure as death, right? Everything ends at a certain point. And so this chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, Krishna speaks about how to remember him at the time of death. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So actually, I think this is not recording, or is it? It's recording, right? Recording to the cloud. Yeah, okay. So So the title of this chapter is Attaining the Supreme, Remembering Krishna at the Time of Death. This is the chapter in which, and we'll talk about this more, this is the chapter in which Krishna talks about remembering him at the time of death. And Srila Prabhupada in the purports, he talks about chanting the holy name of Krishna, the Maha Mantra, more times than any other chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, showing us that how chanting Krishna's holy names is so important, so essential for remembering Krishna at the time of death. Again and again, something like I counted at one time 6 times in 6 different purports, Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So that's the essence, that's the most important part. So here we are. This is the summary of the chapter sections. Text 1 through 4, Krishna's answers to Arjuna's questions. Arjuna begins this chapter by asking him 8 questions, and Krishna answers all 8 of them, the first 7 in the first few verses, and then the 8th one, which is the most important question, he talks about in the rest of the chapter. Text 5 to 9, remembering Krishna at the time of death. 10 to 13, Yoga Mishra Bhakti. 14 to 16, pure devotional service. 17 to 22, comparing the material and spiritual worlds. And 23 to 28, the supremacy of pure devotion in attaining Krishna. The supremacy of pure devotion in attaining Krishna. So very special chapter. As you can see, Krishna's kind of working his way to the final point, where not only is he telling Arjuna to remember him at the time of death, but he's also describing him why it's a good reason to go to the spiritual world. Why is it a good reason to remember him and go to the spiritual world? So he compares the material and spiritual worlds. And then this is the ultimate process, pure devotional service. In chapter 7, Krishna ends with remembering him at death. Arjuna starts this chapter by asking for clarity about terms Krishna used and how one can remember the Lord at death. Right? So the last chapter, the last verse of the last chapter, 1 second here. Chapter 7, let's go here. Yes, this is the last verse of chapter 7, which is knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna says, those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation, of the demigods, and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So he tells that they can remember me, they can know me even at the time of death. Even at the final moment, they can come to the ultimate knowledge, ultimate truth. And you've probably seen people like this in your life, who led a somewhat normal life, but in the last few hours even, they surrender to the Lord. And that's very rare, and that's why Arjuna wanted to ask that, how can I remember you at the time of death? And why is this question so relevant for Arjuna at this time? And it's so relevant to us. Can anyone say, why is this question so relevant, particularly to Arjuna?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Because even he's in the war field, like the battlefield, and he's seeing the right situation at that place.
Yes.
So,
yes, so very nice. We all know, because we are looking at the Mahabharata from hindsight, after it's happened. We all know that Arjuna was not going to die, right? He was under the protection of Krishna, and he would not have died. But Arjuna does not know that. He's just about to start a battle. And in the battle, one cannot philosophize. Once the war starts, you're just fighting. Every moment it's like you're just looking left and right, front and center. I mean, you don't even have kind of the possibility of thinking about anything. And Arjun is wondering that I can die in this battle. This is an immediate question for him. I can die any day. I can die on the first day of the battle. So Krishna, how can I remember you at the time of death? That's the most important question. That's the most wonderful question. And that's the question that Arjuna is asking Krishna. Now, we may feel that we are in a better situation. And it's true. Like, if we were embarking on a military project to go and fight in, I don't know, some war, then we will become more serious about our spiritual life, because the possibility of dying immediately has increased. But what Arjuna is reminding us as the leader, as a king, that all of us, all of the citizens, everyone is also in as precarious of a situation. How, we were just, when we were driving back from New Vrindavan, um, we weren't aware, but it was the start of a storm. And we were driving back on Monday, and the storm was in full force on Tuesday. So we didn't really have news on it. On Tuesday, the news came out. But as we were driving down on Monday morning, we saw one truck that was strewn across the highway. Like the whole truck had side flipped and was strewn across the highway. On the other side, and the whole highway was blocked. It was raining, it was like raining and windy. So it had probably slipped somehow. And then on our side also, a truck had gone like the same place, like on both sides, almost like, I don't know, there's something that happened there that moment. On the other side of the highway, completely separate, they hadn't collided or anything. There's another truck that had gone into the ditch, but not a very deep ditch. So luckily it was okay. And there's one lane on our side open, so we went through that on that side. But any moment we can die. We think we're so safe, we're so, protected. People die in their sleep. People, die, uh, just, falling off their bed. So, so death is something that we must always be prepared for. And this is why an entire chapter of the Gita is devoted to this. And it's the most relevant question for all of us. So the acronym for this chapter, Mother Urmila has put this very nicely here, is dead. It is a sign of sanity and wisdom if one takes time to contemplate their death. Nobody wants it, but everyone has to face it. My philosophy professor, he wasn't a devotee. He was just a philosophy professor. Even he had reflected on this. Every intelligent person would. And in the beginning of his class, he would tell the students that we all have 5,000 weeks to live. And right now, because all of you are young, you have more weeks, right? 100 years, each year is 50 weeks. That's 5,000 weeks. So you're in your 1920s, so you have, about 3,000 weeks to live. An older man like me, he was maybe in his 50s, he says only 2,500 weeks to live. And that's if I live till 100. Statistically speaking, it's very unlikely I live till 100. So probably live till 80. So I have 1,000 or 1,500 weeks to live. And every week, whatever we do, that's 1 week out of our life. That's 1 week out of our life. And so every week is so important. We think, okay, I'll just do this because it's nice to do this. But we don't realize that it's a week of our life that's gone. In chapter 8, Krishna deals with the subject of death, how to prepare for it, what happens at the fateful moment, and what lies beyond. So the first is section, I'll skip this actually, reading all this, but text 1 to 4 are the doubts of Arjuna. Text 5 to 8 is the end of life, how to remember Krishna at the end of life. 9 to 22, you can remember this as attaining the Supreme. How do we attain the Supreme? Krishna described them in spiritual worlds. And finally, devotion, that bhakti or devotion is the path to attain Krishna at the end. How beautiful, how wonderful. The summary of this chapter is, by remembering Lord Krishna in devotion throughout one's life, and especially at the time of death, one can attain to a supreme abode beyond the material world. So I mentioned to you that how it's rare that one can surrender or know Krishna even at the time of death. So Krishna here will tell us how we can prepare for it. So remembering Krishna throughout one's life trains us, prepares us, so that when that moment comes, we can remember him. And therefore Krishna tells Arjuna, Mam anusmara yudhyacha, remember me, and while remembering me, fight. Fight while remembering me. You must do both. You must fight, but you must also remember him. So doing both is most wonderful. So So practice makes a man perfect. And we see that great devotees, even in our movement, contemporary times, devotees, when they're in an accident or suddenly there's about to be an accident, then they will immediately say, "Oh Krishna." It's the first words that will come out of their mouth. "Oh Krishna." And that's the wonderful thing about this process. And one time I was driving with Mother Malati. I was driving her from, I think, New Vrindavan to Columbus or something like that, long time ago. And we got in the car and started driving. And the first thing that she said was, "Can you put a tape of Prabhupada chanting or singing?" She always has some tape that's playing in the car when she's driving. But she said, if something happens, then at least we'll hear his chanting. And if we were to die, we'll chant, hear Krishna, Prabhupada chanting. And after she said that, I mean, just getting in the car, I got a bit afraid. I was like, "Oh, was something going to happen?" And of course, nothing happened. That's why I'm still here. Yeah. But it was such a good training. It was. We think that we're, um, we are, um, so safe and impossible to, nothing. We are so. I'm forgetting the word that I'm looking for. We're immune to this, but she was being a realist. Something could happen. We're going on the highways, so let's keep the tape running. And she was talking and all these things, but in the background, that tape was going on. And then when I was in New Vrindavan this time, then she told me that she had just been in an accident and her entire car got totaled, but she was untouched. Not a scrape on her body was there. And she's like 80 years old, almost 80 or beyond 80. She's very elderly, and she was in a crash that her car got completely totaled. And yet she was completely safe. Can you imagine? Like she wasn't even going for like physical therapy or, like, okay, she didn't get hurt, but maybe she got impact. She was completely fine, she said, no problem. So Krishna protects his devotee who's always thinking of him. And even if she wasn't okay, materially speaking, she was ready. She would have gone back home, back to Godhead. And this happens with many devotees like that, right? My mother was also in an accident with a semi truck just a year ago, and the same thing. The whole car got destroyed, but she was completely fine, no scratch. Of course, luckily the truck was going very slow. It was the truck's fault. They were making an illegal turn, but she was okay. And another family, they attend our, they come to the Bhakti Vriksha here. They also, same thing. Their car was completely totaled, and they were safe. So Krishna protects his devotees. Sometimes he protects them. Sometimes devotees also get hurt in accidents. Some devotees have also died in accidents. So we have to be always prepared in every situation that if something were to happen, am I Krishna conscious? And this is why Srila Prabhupada said that our protection, our shield is that every morning we wake up and we do our sadhana, first thing in the morning. So that if something happens, we've already grounded ourselves, we focused our mind and consciousness on Krishna, and we're ready. We're ready to face life, and we're ready to face death. We're ready to face life because we're in the right consciousness, and we're ready to face death because we're thinking of Krishna. So this is not just theory, this is very important practice, something we should meditate upon and apply in our day-to-day life. In one lecture, Prabhupada says that reading a lot is very nice, but he says that it's not enough. We should read and we should meditate on how we can apply what we have read. The verses of the Gita particularly says, the verses of the Gita, we should think, how should I apply it in my life today? So he said, we should read a few verses and think throughout the day about them and apply them throughout the day. So let's start with Arjuna's other questions first. Questions 1 through 4. He asks, what is Brahman? And Krishna responds, Brahman is the indestructible living entity. So depending on context, Brahman can refer to the living entity, and it can refer to the supreme Lord, he is Brahman. It can refer to the all-pervasive aspect of the Lord as Brahman, the impersonal energy, and it can refer to Krishna, Parabrahman, as the supreme Brahman. But everyone, each one of us is Brahman. We're an individual living entity. And because Brahman means different things according to different contexts, this is why people sometimes get confused when reading the Gita, and they identify us with God. But the word Brahman, in the most general sense, simply means spirit, spiritual. So anything that's spiritual, you can call it Brahman. Just like all water is Brahman. But then you have different, you could say, you have different degrees or quantities of Brahman. The living entity is the minute Brahman. And in this context, Brahman is referring to the spark, the spirit soul. Second question, what is Adhyatma? Adhyatma, Arjuna is asking, what is Adhyatma? It's the living entity's nature, which is to serve. Adhyatma, the living entity's nature. What is the nature of the living entity? That is Adhyatma. 3, what is karma? Arjuna asks. Karma, action pertaining to the development of the material bodies. So again, karma is the word which can refer to just action or activity. But in this context, in the context of these chapters, karma is referring to the action particularly that is in relation to when we perform karma in this world, it leads to a reaction, and that reaction is our future body. That reaction forms our future place, position, and body in our next life. It also affects our present body. So karma can also refer to the law of karma, which is the law of action and reaction. But karma in its most general sense just means activity. And this is why the Gita says, Janma karma chame divyam, right? That Krishna's janma and karma are divine. Janma karma chame divyam. So Krishna also performs activities. They're divyam. And in that context, it doesn't refer to the development of the material bodies. It refers to spiritual activity. I'll skip some of these slides because of the purpose of time. So, regarding Adhyatma, there's this very beautiful quote. Maharaj Kulashekar, a great devotee, prays, "My dear Lord, just now I am quite healthy, and it is better that I die immediately, so that the swan of my mind can seek entrance at the stem of your lotus feet." So this is the mood of a devotee. This is the nature of a devotee, that we just want to be sure that we can remember Krishna at the time of our death. And so Maharaj Kulashekar is praying in this way that maybe later on when I'm sick or in coma, I won't be able to remember you. But right now, my mind is clear. I can remember you. So let me die immediately. That's his desire. Let me die immediately just so I can remember you. This is the greatness of a devotee. Of course, we don't want to die because we have service to do for Krishna. And we want to practice and prepare and become as spiritually elevated, or you could say as spiritually developed as we can before that test comes. But in terms of the mood, this is the mood of a devotee, that better to die early in full consciousness of the Lord than to die after in a state of mind where you cannot then remember Krishna. This one is important here. Arjuna, when he asks these questions, he refers to Krishna as Madhusudana. And he's referring specifically to Krishna using these names because Krishna killed the Madhu demon. So in the same way, he's saying, kill the demons of my doubts. So, Sanskrit and devotees are so eloquent, even when they're asking, they're referring to Krishna in names that are appropriate for that particular time. Okay. Text question 4 that Arjuna is asking. What is Adibhuta? Adibhuta refers to the ever-changing material nature. Adibhuta, right? So these are the material nature that is always changing. What is Adidaiva? Adidaiva refers to the universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods. What is Adiyagya? Adiyagya is the Lord of all sacrifices, Krishna as the super soul. And finally, number 7, where does Adiyagya preside? And Krishna's answer is within everyone's heart, right within your heart. So these are very foundational, fundamental questions. This is why Arjuna is asking. He's clarifying his concepts. He's trying to understand things as they are. He's trying to understand what is karma, what is material nature. As you know, Gita talks about 5 fundamental topics, and this is kind of an expansion of that. It talks about karma. We ask karma. It talks about the self, that is Brahman, the Atma, that Arjuna asked about. It talks about material nature, that's Adibhuta. It talks about Ishvara, God, that is Adidaiva. And it talks about Kala, or time, and that is also, well, actually, time is Adidaiva, more like the universal form, and Ishvara is Adiyagya. So he's asking these questions because this is the core of the Gita's teachings, understanding things as they are, so we can give up the fear of death, because we know that we are an eternal spirit soul. We know that Krishna is eternal, and we know that our eternal home is Krishna's abode. So this last one, Adhi, it's being explained that Adhi means above, over and above. Arjuna is actually asking about the identity of the Adi, the one above or ruling over the material body, the physical manifestation, the demigods, and the different sacrifices. So one who is above the yagyas, above all the demigods, the Daiva refers to demigods, that is the Supreme Lord. That which is above the bhutas, or the material elements, that is material nature, or prakriti. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adibhuta. So this was the first of the 4 we talked about. So now we come to the 8th question. Arjuna's 8th question. And most important one, the rest of the chapter deals with this. How can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? This is his final question Arjuna is asking. And here it is. How can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? The answer is mainly given in text 5 to 8. The answer to that becomes a major topic in this chapter. The title of the chapter is derived from this question. So very important. Whosoever remembers the Supreme at the point of death will attain the supreme destination. For one's state of mind at the time of death determines the destination attained in the next life. So this is the law of nature. Whatever one remembers at the time of death, that's what one attains at the time of death. So one who attains the Supreme will attain the Lord at the time of death. And here are examples of great personalities who attained the Lord at the time of death. Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya, personally danced with his dead body after he passed away, his spiritual dead body. He danced with it to show the greatness, the transcendental nature of the pure devotee. And what was Haridas Thakur always engaged in doing? He was always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna. And therefore, there's no question that he could remember Krishna at the time of death. He died at will. He died with the permission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he did not want to see Lord Chaitanya's final pastimes. He knew that Lord Chaitanya was going to leave this world soon. Krishna, in the form of his devotee, was going to leave this world, and he didn't want to see that final pastime, his departure pastime. There would be too much separation for him from the Lord. So he requests Lord Chaitanya, can I go before you? And then Lord Chaitanya does his final pastime. Similarly, Bhishmadev, he was a great devotee of the Lord. And the Lord firstly gives his audience to Bhishmadev before he leaves this world. And this is why Bhishmadev is one of the Mahajans. He gives instructions, very much like Prabhupada gave instructions. He gives instructions to Maharaj Yudhishthira before leaving this world. And he's so exalted. He was on a bed of arrows, pierced by these arrows, yet he would not feel the pain because of his transcendental consciousness. And even in that state, he was speaking, he was giving instructions, and the Lord here was listening to his transcendental instructions on devotional service to Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was a fighter, warrior, yet through his service, he could remember the Lord. And finally, we have Bharat Maharaj, who, due to attachment to a small deer, though he was such an exalted soul, he was on the platform of Bhava. Bhava is just one step below Prema. It's literally impossible to fall on that stage, but still he had one small anartha, which was attachment to protecting. He was a king, so he was feeling that I'm the protector of all living beings. A king is supposed to protect, but he was feeling that he's the protector, not that the Lord is the protector. So due to an attachment to a small fawn, a little deer, he thinks of the deer at the time of death. So in his next life, he becomes a deer. And then in his next life, he comes back as Jad Bharat, or literally the foolish Bharat. And then he purposely acts like a madman so that he would not get attached to anything. Because he can remember his past lives, that I was so exalted. I gave up my entire kingdom. I was so devoted to the Lord. I was on the highest stage of love of God. Yet just to one small attachment, I'm still in this material world. And so he says, fine, then I will, in this world, act like a deaf and dumb man so that no one becomes attached to me and I don't become attached to anyone. And in this way, though externally looking like a dumb man, internally, he's the greatest devotee of the Lord. And then in that next life, then he leaves his body and attains the Supreme Lord. The word smaranam, Prabhupada says in purport 8.5, remembering is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should chant constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in the end of chapter 7, Krishna says here, those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material nature, of the demigods, etc., can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So he's saying those who are in full consciousness of me, they can always remember me, even at the most fearful moment, the moment of death. So if we can surrender to Krishna, even at the point of death, why do we need to do all this practice and do Bhakti Shastri and read the Gita? Because Prabhupada here is answering that we need to be in full consciousness of Krishna, as this text is saying, 730 is saying, and that full consciousness is not possible unless we've practiced. Unless we have practiced devotional service, it's not possible. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we are incessantly chanting the Mahamantra. And this is why it's very difficult to do, but we must remember that even in times of sickness, we must always keep our Krishna consciousness alive, always continue to remember Krishna, to hear about Krishna, to chant about Krishna. Because in old age and sickness, these are exactly the times when we need to prepare even more. We have to be always prepared so that whenever the end of life may come, we are incessantly absorbed in the Lord and therefore incessantly chanting the Mahamantra. Prabhupada here used the words incessant, continuously, always. And this means on the beads, and this means also even when we are not able to hold the beads. Let's say we're driving. It's a little unsafe to have beads in your hand and drive. But we can always chant and drive. We can always be saying the Mahamantra while we drive. We may be cooking, and while you're cooking, you cannot hold the beads and cook. The fire will burn you if you're trying to hold the bead bag and this or whatnot. But we can chant while we cook, or we can hear a tape, we can hear a lecture, we can hear kirtan while we cook. The goal is that always in every situation, in every time, in every place, we should be chanting the Mahamantra or hearing Krishna or remembering Krishna. Therefore, throughout life, one should practice remembering Krishna by dedicating his mental and physical activities to the Lord's service. This will ensure that one remembers Krishna at the time of death and thus attains this supreme abode. And so here we go, the verse I was quoting, text 8.7. So Arjuna is a warrior. We are business people. Someone may be a business people. We are doctors. We are lawyers. So many types of people are, professions here that people are practicing. Those of you who are on the call. And you may think, well, how can I always incessantly chant the Mahamantra? This is not possible. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. So this is actually very real. This is tangible, that while we're doing our work, while we are taking an interview for a job, while we are giving a report to our boss, we have to remember Krishna at those moments always as well. And then Krishna will allow that which is good for us to happen. It's a fact. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said that those things are very difficult, become very easy if one remembers Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu before in doing that activity. And if one doesn't remember the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Krishna, those things that are very easy become very difficult. This is the power of remembering Krishna. We're busy with our work, but before we start a work, before in the course of doing the work, we can always remember Krishna. His Holiness Hanumat Preshak Maharaj, he says that my personal experience, he says, is that if you're chanting the Mahamantra in a very difficult situation and you continue chanting all the way till the end, you don't stop chanting even for a moment, then things will be okay. Krishna will somehow protect you. Because in the Bhagavatam, it said in the 10th canto, in the Krishna book, Prabhupada says that when the residents of Vrindavan are in a difficult situation, they're being attacked by the torrents of rain of Indra, then it says there that what misfortune could come upon those who are continuously engaged in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Lord. No misfortune can come upon them. And because the residents of Vrindavan will always absorb in Krishna, how could there be any misfortune for them? So Krishna's name is all pure, his activities are all pure. If we are in touch with them, then no misfortune can come to us. Those two things cannot be together. So, so even in a very difficult situation, we can definitely do that. How will we think of Krishna throughout our day and at the time of death? We will do it by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. That's so Prabhupada here is saying, how can we think of Krishna? We can think of Krishna by chanting the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It appears in the purports of this chapter 6 times. So this is the best method, the most powerful method of remembering Krishna at the time of death. And here we see devotees in Europe. They're doing Harinam on the streets of Europe so blissfully. I actually know this devotee. He's a very sweet devotee. He was he's lost most of his teeth. You don't see it in this picture. All his front teeth are gone, and he's always chanting, he's going on Harinam, and they're in bliss. You can see complete bliss. So this is all around the world. You know, someone is chanting in America, someone is chanting in India, someone's chanting in Europe, someone's chanting in Vrindavan, and they're all experiencing the same things. How many times does the entire mantra appear in the Bhagavad Gita? In each chapter. This is a comparison. How many times does Prabhupada repeat the entire Mahamantra? As I mentioned to you, the most effective, powerful way to remember Krishna at the time of death, Prabhupada in this chapter is saying, is the chanting of Krishna's Mahamantra, his holy name. And so, just to kind of clarify that point, in other chapters, there's 18 chapters. In chapter 4, the entire Mahamantra is repeated once, mentioned once, written once by Prabhupada. In chapter 6, one time. In chapter 7, one time. In chapter 8, 6 times. In chapter 9, 3, etc. And you see that only in chapter 8 is it repeated so many times. And it's a fact when you're reading through it, like Prabhupada, you just said this, but again, he's repeating it. Next verse and chapter you read, Srila Prabhupada, you just said this, but again, he's saying it. He repeats it 6 times so that we know for certain that if we chant Krishna's holy names, we can hear him, we can realize him, and we don't have any reason to be fearful. Another form of chanting is distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada says that is also kirtan, is distributing Bhagavatam and Gita to others, because we're giving people the holy name. That book is literally the holy name in paper form. And we're giving that. And Prabhupada in one place actually says that it is the better kirtan. It is even better than kirtan, meaning that it's even more powerful than chanting on the streets, is simultaneously or equally powerful, and Prabhupada saying even more powerful, is to give people these books, because they take these books and they take them home, and then they may forget about Krishna for 3 years, They may see devotees on the street chanting, they may forget about them. But the book is still in their home, and one day they come back to it and they start reading it. And we have thousands and millions of stories like this of the devotees who do that. So sharing this holy name in any form is very, very potent. And Srila Prabhupada said that those who are doing this work of distributing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita to others, he said that Lord Chaitanya, Krishna, will forcefully enter into your mind at the time of death. So you would say, well, I'm chanting, but still, what's the surety that I will remember Krishna? But the point is that if we are chanting, if we're trying to fix our consciousness on Krishna during our life, then even if we don't remember Krishna at the end of life, Krishna will forcefully enter into our mind at that time so that we can remember him. So that at that moment we will remember him. Because we may say, I may die in a coma. So many people do die in a coma. I may die not in full consciousness, where I can think of Krishna, but Krishna will protect us. So this process of chanting is there not just so that we are in that consciousness so we can remember Krishna at the time of death, but this consciousness is there because this is Krishna consciousness, right? This consciousness is there because by chanting Krishna's holy names, we will remember him at the time of death. One's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna. By this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is very easy to practice. So, this is a very wonderful passage, and this is why I wanted to highlight it, that one's memory of Krishna is revived. It's like all these activities in devotional service, they're reminding us of what's it like to be in a spiritual consciousness, in the spiritual world. Like Prabhupada, in one place he describes, like, why do we smell the flower when we do the artik? Because when we smell the flower, that flower that's offered to Krishna is transcendental. So when we smell it, we'll be reminded, oh, this is how transcendental smell is. This is how the flowers at the lotus feet of Krishna in the spiritual world smell like. Similarly, when we are, receiving the artik of Krishna, then we are reminded about Krishna's warmth, his beauty. But there's nothing more powerful that revives our memory of Krishna than the holy name of Krishna. What it does is that it awakens our lost memory. And so it works in a very mystical way. It seems like, oh, this chanting, what is this chanting? It's just like, okay, somehow I have to meditate on it, somehow I have to focus on it. But it's working on a very deep level. That chanting is connecting us with Krishna, it's reviving our memory of Krishna. So, and then just recently someone was saying, why do we chant loudly? Why not within our mind? Because one's ear, tongue, and mind are all engaged. We're engaging everything. We're absorbing all the senses in the Supreme Lord. See, we are very good at performing activities without knowing the purpose. We perform rituals without knowing the purpose. But if one knows the purpose, then it'll be clear why we are doing things in the way that we are. If the purpose is to always remember Krishna and never forget him, which is what Rupa Goswami says, that's the purpose of all spiritual activities, to fix our mind on Krishna, which Krishna here is confirming, this is the path back to him. Then logically speaking, the easiest way to fix to remember Krishna is to absorb all of our senses in it. So the idea is that we're trying to absorb as many senses as possible in any spiritual activity that we do. And by chanting a little loudly, we can hear it in our ears, our tongue, our mind, everything's engaged. And finally, Prabhupada is saying this is a mystical meditation. It's very easy to practice, but it's mystical. So it's not within the material purview. It's not within material logic. By chanting, we will see that this process mystically works in our hearts and brings us close to Krishna. By chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind always on the Supreme Lord. The mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by force to think of Krishna. So now we may say, well, okay, we'll just chant and and it's mystical, it'll work. But simultaneously, Prabhupada is saying, but we have to put the effort also. The fickle mind is very fickle, but we would like, but we need to fix the mind on Krishna. So now text 9 through 13. This is the next section. When we practice remembering Krishna by meditating on him as the wisest, oldest person, who is a controller and maintainer of all, yet is smaller than the smallest and has an inconceivable, transcendental form beyond all darkness and brilliant like the sun. So why is hearing about Krishna so important? Because then we know how to meditate upon him. We have to meditate upon him in these ways. Krishna is the greatest, the smallest, the inconceivable. He has a transcendental form and he's beyond all darkness and he's brilliant like the sun. So what could be better? We're not just remembering on an empty light or empty room or a black dot on the room, but we are meditating upon Krishna. We are meditating upon the Supreme Lord. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything. This is a library with all these books. This is probably a library in Oxford. This is the way the Oxford libraries look. They're like different levels, and you climb upstairs to go to the different levels of these books. And now with the internet, no one goes to the library, but nevertheless, these were all the libraries there. He who is the oldest, it's the wisest, the oldest. Who is the controller? He controls everything, all the planets, the earth, different species of life. Who is smaller than the smallest? He's present within every atom as Paramatma. These images are helping us that how can we meditate on Krishna in these specific ways that Krishna has prescribed. He's the maintainer of everything. All these worlds are being maintained by him. They would have long been destroyed, but Krishna is protecting them. And that's our hope. We keep thinking, well, with all these nuclear bombs, the world will be destroyed. But no, if Krishna is maintaining it, it will not be destroyed. And he's beyond all material conception. He's not limited to our teeny brains. This is why we need Shastra. This is why we need the Mahatmas. Because with our brain, we can only go so far. But through this transcendental knowledge, we can know Krishna completely. Still, he's unlimited. But everything that there is to know about Krishna, that can be written down, that can be told to us, will be told to us. And then we will continue exploring Krishna. He is the inconceivable. He is so inconceivable. Krishna is so inconceivable. Who is always a person. Yet, he's inconceivable. He's beyond our senses. He's unknowable. He's unlimited. It's so sublime, right? Is this Gita? All of this is there. And what makes him even more sublime is that he's still a person, a lovable, real, tangible person who can love and serve. And this is the glory of Krishna. He's not lost in this world. He's not lost in the cosmos. Well, he's all of these things, so therefore he's just this big cosmos. He's still a person. He is luminous like the sun. Wow. He's luminous like the sun. This is Parashuram here, in his form as Parashuram. And he is transcendental beyond this material nature. See, the scriptures are giving us so many ways of remembering Krishna, right? All these different ways. This is his unlimited kindness, that somehow or the other, I can remember you, right? Somehow or the other. And we are so unfortunate that the scriptures are giving us so many ways, yet we're not pursuing even one method. To facilitate this meditation, one should practice fixing the prana on the topmost chakra, should renounce all sense gratification, especially sex life, and should chant Om to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now these verses are telling us how to actually do this. This is now the process of yoga. And Krishna is telling us, try to follow all these things. Practice following the rules and regulations, and practice saying the name of God. As far as the physical process of fixing the prana and the yogic processes, devotees also do some physical yoga. Many devotees do some physical yoga because that helps focus the mind. It's a fact that can help. It's a physical process. Like Prabhupada was saying in that purport, the mind is so obstinate, one has to forcefully fix it. So that yoga process helps in that process. At the same time, it's a personal experience that by chanting the Mahamantra, we also are able to, by engaging in the yoga of mantra meditation, so to say, one is practicing this fixing the prana in the topmost chakra. Because you'll see that devotees who chant very nicely, their minds and bodies are very fit. I mean, of course, we still have a material body, so the material body will break down eventually. But it's mystical. Like there's one devotee, he chants 64 rounds every day, and it's very important chanting. And he's an elderly man. Many of you know him. His name is Shyam Sundar Prabhu, and he'll just sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, chanting. And even a young person cannot sit in a chair for that long and not have back pain and neck pain and this, but he's sitting there and somehow, it's amazing. For 10, 12 hours a day, sometimes he'll just be sitting in one chair. And he doesn't have back problem. He doesn't, his body doesn't even ache. And it's really mystical. Like I'm giving this class and now my back is starting to ache, my neck is starting to ache, and I have to get up, right? But all the other results of yoga, this is the point, all the other results of yoga are within the chanting of Krishna's holy names. It's tangible, personal experience. It takes time to reach that point. This devotee has been chanting his whole life, the last 40, 50 years, and now he's come to this point. He's been chanting very regularly, very sincerely, constantly, for many hours a day, and now he's come to this point. But the main point is that we don't have to go searching separately how to do the physical yoga. At the same time, the physical yoga, it can help us keep the body and mind fit so that we're not disturbed while we're chanting. And so therefore it's recommended. But and so if it's recommended, then what's the point? The point is that, but the process of chanting is not dependent on the physical process. That's the point, that Mahamantra includes all the physical also. For those of us who are not perfected in our chanting, we can do the physical practice because it helps us. But it's not a necessary companion. Everything is within the holy name of Krishna. Everything is all knowledge, all renunciation of yogic practice is present in taking the name of Krishna, because Krishna and his name are non-different. Purport: at the moment, such brahmachari, unmarried celibate life is not at all possible. The social construction of the world has changed so much that there's no possibility of one's practicing celibacy from the beginning of student life. We see, so one of the requirements for practicing yogic, practices is to give up sex life. And Prabhupada is saying that very few people in this world are lifelong monks. Students today, we see that it's the diametric opposite. They're not practicing celibacy. They're, if a student gets married and has one relationship, that is a great, person today. So how to help these people? How to help these people? Of course, devotees practice celibacy, but how to help others who are not on that process and bring them to this process? So it says, unless one practices celibacy, advancing in spiritual life is very difficult. But at the same time, you really cannot advance unless we focus the mind away from sensual pursuits to spiritual pursuits. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has announced, according to the scriptural injunctions for this age of Kali, that in this age, no process of realizing the Supreme is possible, except the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. So, so now Prabhupada is going through every aspect. So Krishna is describing the process of yoga, and Prabhupada is going through each one and telling us, how do we apply this in this day and age? How do we actually practice this as far as householders, working people go? So celibacy will be attained or reached by the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. And now Krishna is saying in text 12, close all the doors of the senses and fix the mind and heart and the life air at the top of the head. This is the practice of yoga, the different chakras in the body. Vibrating the sacred syllable Om, thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is essential for this process. And Prabhupada in the purport then clarifies, as a final point, I want to mention this, the sound Hare Krishna contains Om. The sound of Krishna's holy name. So why then we just chant Om, Om, Om? Because Krishna in other sections, he says, Yagya Nam Japa Yagyosmi. In chapter 10, he clarifies that the japa, the chanting of Krishna's holy names, is the highest yagya. It contains Om. Om is the name of Krishna that refers to the impersonal aspect of Krishna, the all-pervasive aspect of Krishna. And the impersonal aspect is contained in the personal aspect. So when we say Krishna, that's as good as equivalent to saying Om, but even better, because it's more personal. It's directly referring to Krishna's name. And Arjuna in the Gita confirms this in chapter 11. He tells Krishna, you are Param Brahma, Param Dhama. You are the highest Brahman. Om is Brahman. Krishna is Param Brahma, Param Dhama. And therefore, by chanting Krishna's holy name, we are chanting the Om vibration. So I will stop here. This covers the main points of this chapter. There's more that we can discuss. There's more verses that in your own time, in your homework, you should go over. But as you can, ascertain, I'm a little under the weather today, so I want to keep the class a little short. So we'll stop here and see if there's any comments or questions, clarifications. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, well explained.
Hare Krishna.
This is the main point of the life, like about the death, how we should be more preventive, careful, always be with the smaran of the Lord's name.
Yes. 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 This
Mhm.
is yes.
It's like the essence.
Mm.
This
It's
is
actually the goal. The Prabhupada says in one purport, he says that the reason we have so many books, the reason I've written, and translated so many books, he says, is just to convince you to chant Hare Krishna. So all these books are there to help to convince us about the importance of chanting Krishna's holy names. Just like my own reading and preparation for this class, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I read things that convinced me further that 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 I should do this. And it seems like why so many books would be necessary for this, because so much we need to be reminded so often, and we also need to be reminded in so many different ways. Like in order to do it, we first need to be convinced that this is the thing to do. So many of the books are first of all telling us um, the nature of Krishna, the nature of the spiritual world, the nature of this material world, so that we're convinced that this is a real philosophy. This is the real philosophy. This is the absolute truth in that sense. There's so many philosophies, but this one is really giving us the complete picture. And then once we have the conviction, then we'll seriously take up the process. And once we take up the process, then we forget to do it or we become lax. We think, oh, is it really powerful? Is it going to work or not? So then we have these reminders and all these wonderful purports and verses that are encouraging us that no, this is going to work. Keep chanting. Or this is the way to reach the Lord. Keep chanting. So that is the goal, like you're saying. That's the essence, is to
And
help us
one more
remember
thing
Krishna.
is like we are like we know like we all might get there, we all will get death, but still it is very hard truth for us to accept on a flat way. Like though we know it is
Uh,
not easy for anyone to accept it and like digest it,
yes,
um, because it's always an unexpected thing.
yes.
So yeah, like recently we went through like many things, like when my father-in-law left his body, it was
Mm,
all very sudden. But where that point I understood, like we are preaching, we are telling others like these things are very important. That is the
mm,
reason you to do
yes,
chanting. But
yes,
when it comes to us, what is that we are able to take it over? I
yes,
really felt that, Prabhu. This is my personal thing.
yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mataji, for sharing this. And you're absolutely right that it's in these moments that actually we see the relevance of this philosophy. We see the depth of it and why it's so important. Um, it from theoretical, it becomes very practical for us. That, like you're saying, we're preaching this, we're teaching this to others, but um, but we ask ourselves, are we really there ourselves? Am I practicing this? Am I ready for this? Am I preparing myself? And and I was just reading yesterday. We were talking about the glories of Lord Ramachandra in our Bhakti Vriksha here, and in one of the purports, Prabhupada says, I didn't read this one, but in preparing for it, he says that um, the soul is so conditioned that it does not it does not surrender to Krishna, even though it may have the knowledge, even though it's accessible, but it doesn't accept it. And so, therefore, the only way is that then Krishna, um, like you were mentioning, he gives us these shocks in life to wake us up. Otherwise, he says the soul doesn't do it. That's the problem. Though it's there, but therefore, Prabhupada actually uses the word there. He says we have to be beaten by material nature. Like material nature, we say, why does Krishna, why is the world the way it is? What material nature is kind of waking us up, is giving us through these hardships. Um, so yeah, thank you. I actually cannot. Somehow my screen is frozen, so I can't see if someone is raise their arm. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Please just unmute, and then we will go from there.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat
And
Pranam to all great devotees here. Prabhuji, my question to you is, you said that if we distribute Srimad Bhagavatam, then the Lord will take care at the end of the death. So is there any shloka that you could please refer to so that I can note down it?
yes, so I mentioned all of the books, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says that if you keep distributing until the end of your life, Lord Chaitanya will forcefully enter your mind. So I will share that passage on the group. Prabhupada says that, specifically where Prabhupada says that. And as far as the shloka goes, Krishna says that at the end of the Gita. He says, Nacha tasmat manusheshu kashyadhyatati siddhaye yadatam siddhanam kashyamam yati tatata. That in this world, there's no person more dear than that person who shares this knowledge with others, nor will there be anyone more dear. So the idea is that Prabhupada himself is saying that if you remember me at the time of death, Krishna is saying that if you share this knowledge, there's no one more dear to me. So naturally, that person will remember Krishna at the time of death, right? So that's Krishna's final instruction in the Gita, chapter 18. I'm forgetting the exact verse number. Someone can share it on the chat, the verse number, but that's the verse number.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Eternally grateful to you. Please share that passage. I will be looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. And sorry for that, Prabhuji, who wanted to speak. I have stolen the time because I need to go somewhere. I'm
No
really
problem.
sorry.
Thank you. Karthik Chandraprabhu, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna.
Thank you so much for your wonderful class, Prabhuji. Sorry, I had another thing I had to join in the middle. But anyway, the question is, I played us the proper slide. The question is, actually, we are talking about chanting Hare Krishna and studying the mind. So there was a very, very interesting topic, and many times I've seen, the heat of the moment. Sometimes it's the mind overtakes Prabhu. So how is any practical tips, Prabhuji? As a practicing sadhaka, what we should do. Anything practically, if you're from your experience. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. One Srila Prabhupada disciple, we met them, and we were talking about this topic. It was a morning Bhagavad class, and we were asking this question: how can we remember Krishna always? This is the focus, always remembering Krishna. And we specifically then talked about how can you remember while chanting? And she was telling a incident with Prabhupada, like an incident meaning a memory of Srila Prabhupada, that someone asked Prabhupada in Mayapur that, Prabhupada, like, when can I chant with full remembrance? Like you're saying, the mind takes over. And Prabhupada said, oh, you must chant for at least 40 years. At least 40 years. Then you will get it. So the process of chanting is an actual process that takes time for perfection. And we try and we fail, and again we try and fail. This is why Arjuna, we read in chapter 6, right? He says that I feel that to control the mind is impossible. Chanchalahi mana Krishna pramati balavadratam. It's more flickering than the wind. I cannot control my mind, Krishna. But Krishna says, no, you can, with practice and detachment. It's possible, but with practice and detachment. Practice must be there, detachment must be there, practice must be there. So when the mind takes over, we have to somehow bring it back. And, I'm sometimes sitting with a picture of Krishna in front of my nose, chanting, focusing, and still Krishna's there, hearing everything, still mind is going somewhere else, right? Like as much as, you were trying to focus and, having, everything Krishna around us, but still the mind goes and I only realize that my mind is somewhere else 20 minutes later. Like 20 minutes, I don't even realize that I'm not thinking, I'm not thinking of Krishna. So it's it's a practice, and that practice takes real effort.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yeah.
And one thing that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, that hearing about Krishna is the Swarup Shakti of chanting, meaning that one way that the mind will not overcome us is if we hear about Krishna. So that's why hearing and chanting go together. So on days you'll notice, you can practice, you can experiment yourself. On the days that you read a lot and you hear Bhagavatam, and you know, or you're absorbed in Krishna conscious activities, like if you're hearing about Krishna, it's easier to chant, because there's no, you know, we cannot trick Krishna, right? If all day we're engaged in material activities, and then when we sit to chant our malas, then we think, oh, but my mind will be perfectly focused on Krishna when I chant, then it won't work. So what we do the rest of the day is actually preparation for our chanting. If the rest of the day we're absorbed in Krishna's thought and we're in a Krishna conscious state of mind, then when we sit to chant, then our chanting will be very good. And I noticed that also, like one day I had to prepare for a class, and it was like kind of a big class with a big audience. And so I was preparing, and it's a new topic. It was like on some Vaishnava Acharya, very amazing. So I was like preparing the whole day, the day before, reading about this great Vaishnava Acharya. And it took like 4 or 5 hours at least the day before. And then the next day when I was chanting, my rounds were very good. I thought, oh, what happened? Like somehow it's better today. And then I realized, oh yeah, yesterday I was you know, thinking of Krishna. I was kind of hearing about Krishna, and that helped me. So your Bhakti Shastri, your reading of Gita, your study of the scriptures will actually help you in the chanting also. It's all together. Our seva, our practical service also helps us in chanting. Also the day, for example, we go on book distribution, the next day the chanting is really nice. So everything is there. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Nice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Uh,
Yes.
who we were talking about, how Krishna saves us. I was just thinking that, how, sometimes we fail to realize immediately the God's hand in how he saves us.
Yes.
And once we start realizing that, I
Mm.
think to realize that also, I think we need certain training of our mind. And once we start realizing that, I don't think we can ever forget that we see God's hand in everything.
Yes.
It's a very big realization, Prabhu.
Yes, it's a fact. Actually, interesting is a fact. Once we have a genuine, very strong experience of Krishna's protection, and also just Krishna in general, then it's very hard to forget him. And it's like it sticks with us. We know, like once you get that taste, like Bhagavatam describes Narad Muni, once he has the audience of the Lord, he sees the Lord within his heart, that he's always searching for that the rest of his life. He can never forget it. And spiritual life is very much like that. Prabhupada says we practice, and then Krishna gives us a window all of a sudden, and we get a spiritual experience. And then our hearts are very attached to him. At the same time, like Jad Bharat, it's very easy to slip again. So that's why the devotee is always praying to Krishna that please protect me from Maya. Yes. But
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Also,
Sorry.
Prabhu, a quick, also Guru Maharaj always says, whenever anybody asks him, how can I improve my chanting? He always says, just keep chanting.
Yes. Yes. And it's a very nice point, Prabhu. Thank you for putting that in, because quantity really helps. And I was noticing that just yesterday in the chanting, that until we actually chant some rounds, it's very hard to focus the mind. Then starting round 12 and 13, our mind starts to become more and more focused. So it's quality, but it's also quantity. Both things are very powerful, because just chanting somehow, very mystically, it helps the mind. If we have the desire to focus, if we're not even trying, then Krishna says, well, we're not trying sincerely. But if we're trying but we're failing, then the more we chant, the easier it is to focus the mind. Yes. Thank you. Divya Bhakti Mataji.
Hey, Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much for the class. I need some clarification. So when chanting the syllable Om, since Om is contained within the sound of Hare Krishna, is it necessary to chant the syllable Om? Is rather than just continue chanting the Maha Mantra? Is it similar to so say to the situation of where we're advised just worship Krishna, don't bother worshiping the demigods?
I see. It's slightly different. And we, in another section of the Bhakti Shastra, I forget where, we really get into the word Om. And so Om is not like the demigods, because Om is actually representing Krishna. So whereas the demigods are servants of Krishna and they are kind of assistants of the Lord, the Om is representing Krishna. But the Om, a vibration, it's generally there, like we say, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That all Vedic mantras start with the word Om, because Om contains everything else. It's the name of Krishna that contains all of the words. It's the most auspicious. It's kind of the gateway into the mantra. But all the scriptures, and in that section of Bhakti Shastri where we get into it, they tell us that that this Om, just like we say Brahman, right? Brahman is there, Krishna's Brahman. It's very, you could say, it's very pervasive throughout the Vedic scriptures, yet it's not different than Krishna's holy names. It's because Brahman refers to Krishna, and Krishna refers to Brahman, right? Yet we still prefer to call Krishna Krishna rather than Brahman, because it's more personal. We can say, oh, Brahman, we can go up to the deity and say, oh, Brahman, but it's a bit odd because it's like Krishna is Brahman, he's spirit, that's true, but he's more than that. So the devotee, because the devotee is interested in a personal relationship with Krishna, we prefer to say the name Krishna rather than Om. But those who are satisfied with just knowing the Brahman feature of the Lord, they say Om. So it's actually the other way around, that as we progress, we go from Om to more personal ways of knowing Krishna and saying his name. And this is why here Krishna is saying that Om does contain everything. It's the best, because it is true. That's just like just praising God is enough. But then we know that in praising God, there's different rasas or relationships with Krishna. And the more intimate it gets, the more, you go from Sakhya to Vatsalya to Madhurya, being a friend of Krishna, being a lover of Krishna. So these are all different ways of loving Krishna. And this is just a deeper way of knowing Krishna and remembering him.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice question. And Rasa Keli Mataji.
Yes, bro. I just had some things to add. So,
Oh yeah. Thank you.
So we can see that it's very nice, like the 8th question of Arjun, that how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So Krishna answers that whoever remembers the Supreme at the point of death will attain the supreme destination for one's state of mind at the time of death. Time of death determines the destination attained in the next life. So a very nice, also like you also gave the examples of Bharat Maharaj and Bhisham Dev, like how the Lord he personally instructed Bhisham Dev at the end of his life. And also you also gave the example of Haridas Thakur, that how Lord Chaitanya he personally danced with the body of Haridas Thakur. Thank you, Guruji.
Yes, so nicely put. And this is actually why I saved you for the end, because you summarize it so nicely every time. You know, that's something a teacher should do, is actually summarize the class at the end, and I don't do that. So you do it always, and it's so wonderful. I do it in such sublime simplicity, right? This is Prabhupada, that's why I said that even a child can become fully Krishna conscious, because Krishna consciousness is so logical and so straightforward. So, and you are our best student. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bela Gupta.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam. So my question is not related to this. I'm being more selfish. So anyhow, bear with me. The question I have is for the exam.
Yes.
So when we are
Yes.
talking about the memorizing the shlokas,
Yes.
do we need to also memorize the number of the shloka, like 7.14? So if the exam, yeah.
Yes, we should, because sometimes the verse number is given. Well, that's actually how it is. It's like we give the verse number and then you have to write it down. Sometimes, like in previous exams, I can't remember, I sometimes gave the first word because people forget what the first word is. But yeah, I think in this exam, we just give the verse numbers. And luckily, there's not so many. There's like total of, I think, 40 verses, I think, that we remember.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. Still, it's a lot. I know that.
Yeah.
There's this one group here in Chicago, and their practice is they memorize the entire Gita. And in 7 to 8 months, they memorize the entire Bhagavad Gita. And there's like, 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they memorize the entire Gita. They have some process by which they just memorize the entire Gita. So we're actually very fortunate. We just have to do 40 verses. But still, it's a lot. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So all of you have the homework. Please do the homework. It's very important. And the most important part of the homework is to read the chapter, to digest it, and to then share your realization by answering those questions. This lecture is just to show, clarify the points. And there's so many things that we cannot cover in this hour that we do. So don't miss that opportunity of doing the homework. Of course, to take the exam, for those of you taking the course as a certificate, to take the exam, the student must fulfill all the homeworks. They must complete them all and attend all the lectures. If you miss one in person, then to listen to the recording. That's just the VIG requirement. And so that's why we do that. But those of you who are just, joining to listen, you're welcome just to listen and do the homework whenever you can. But those of you who are doing it for the actual Bhakti Shastri course, it's the rule that we can't take the exam unless we complete the homework. So make sure to do that and don't leave it for the last minute. Okay, thank you so much for joining, and we'll meet next week, same time, same place. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Abdul Bhaiya, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Yeah.